Welcome, golfers, to the 13th episode of the Read It, Roll It, Hole It podcast. Very fortunate to have a special guest on today, Phil Kenyon. Welcome, Phil.
Hi Ollie, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. And yourself?
Yeah, all good, thanks, mate. All good.
Excellent. Good stuff. How's lockdown treating you?
Yeah, not too bad. Obviously feels a little different this time around. A little bit more sort of frustrating, but yeah, you're doing your best to get through it, keeping myself busy.
Plenty to crack on with, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's always stuff to do. So yeah, just keeping myself busy with a few things, and yeah, hopefully, we'll be back teaching in a couple of weeks.
Is that the plan to go back out on tour in a few weeks?
Well, I think at the moment, it kind of whether you can attend certain events is down to like the region that the event's in and the various protocol and stuff. So I think there's a couple of events in Dubai in December, which I think I may be able to attend, but we'll see how that goes. But if not, at least the golf courses will be open and the studio will be open 2nd of December, so we can get back to work in some, capacity.
Absolutely. Well, best of luck with Dubai if that goes ahead in a few weeks. I'm sure it will.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
Okay, Phil. So we've got a few things sort of on my agenda to go through with you today. Obviously, you're known as one of the best, if not the best, putting coaches in the UK, and you work with a sort of range of players. Can you just tell the audience sort of who you're currently working with?
Well, yeah, I mean, like current clients, in terms of like, tour professionals would include Tommy Fleetwood, Justin Rose, Francesco Molinari, Henrik Stenson, Gary Woodland, Lee Westwood, Brooks Koepka. When I start going through a list, I always think, I'm going to forget someone and piece someone off. And then, guys like Dave Horsey, Chris Wood on the European tour. So yeah, there's a few different guys.
A fair good list there, to be fair, even if you have missed a few off. That's great. Phil, like you've been on sort of tour, you've been a putting coach for 18 years. Is that correct? Is that
Yeah, I
correct?
mean, I guess like full time, it's been about 18 years. I mean, sort of before I packed in playing to concentrate full time on coaching, I was kind of dabbling in it, as a little bit of a part time role because of my relationship with Harold Swash, who's like my mentor. Obviously, Harold's someone that know of, Ollie, but
Yeah.
I'd had sort of very close relationship with Harold as a junior golfer and as an amateur golfer, and when I started playing professionally, I was doing bits with him and helping him in certain things. So I guess like putting has always been part of my life in some capacity. But I guess like from a full time, 100% focus on it. Yeah, it's been about 18 years now.
Brilliant. That's a long time.
Yeah,
Phil,
it feels it.
can you tell me, like, from a coaching point of view, what's changed or what's like evolved from like how you used to coach in the early days, going back 18 years to today? How's your sort of coaching style and what you coach maybe and how you coach? How's that evolved over the years?
Yeah, well, I guess it's evolved a lot, really, which you would hope so, wouldn't you? Um,
Absolutely.
when obviously I started with a little when I started like my full time career, I had a little bit of experience in coaching, and I was lucky that I'd been around a lot of great coaches. I kind of took my, as you would expect as a playing professional, took that very seriously and sought to improve myself and spent time with different coaches. So I learned a lot from the coaches that had been around. So when I started sort of teaching, you got like a little blend of coaching styles from different people. I mean, technically, obviously, I'd had a mentor in Harold Swash. So from a technical input, it was very much obviously influenced by, his beliefs and, his principles, his coaching philosophy, methodology. And then he's taking, bits in from other people. I mean, Harold was, obviously a massive influence for me, and I wouldn't be where I am without Harold's guidance and mentorship. I think he was a very different coach. If you look back at Harold all those years ago, he'd be a very different coach, I think, to how I am now. And I guess that sort of like shows that involvement. And I was very evolvement, I should say. I was very much influenced by Harold in those early years, and I would say Harold had much more of a strict methodology in terms of, he had very sound principles, which I still think, you can apply at this, today. Those principles are sound in terms of, how important the club face angle is, how to create a good roll on the ball, the importance of, acceleration and speed, and, what he would call his fundamentals. I think they still apply today, but he would have a very sort of specific manner in which each student should achieve those. So, you had to grip it a certain way, stand a particular way, and it was a little bit more of a model that he wanted his players to work towards. And I guess the biggest change for me over the years is to actually get away from that and to be not as specific about my preferences. And one of the things that I feel I've learned is to sort of try and coach the individual more, and look at putting it as more of a sort of an individual process. Really, we all have like different bodies, different minds, and we process information differently. And to try and accommodate the individual in that, and make them a sort of better version of themselves, rather than trying to sort of put them into a particular method. So I would say that would be the biggest transition over the years, is to go from quite a sort of prescriptive approach then to way less prescriptive and more individually orientated to that person, I would say.
That's great. Phil, can you share with us like what Harold's beliefs were? What was his model?
Well, he had sort of 4 fundamentals, which when you look back, I mean, and Harold, like, he was talking about this like 40 years ago. When you look back, they're like ball flight laws. He was talking about ball flight laws 40 years ago, before we had like high-speed cameras and TrackMan and stuff like that. And, he was talking about how important the angle of the club face was to start line. And then he was talking about the path relative to, so that was like the first fundamental, he would call it. Second fundamental was the path being square to the strike. That's what he called it. So he didn't want players to cut across the putt, or the path to have too much error, because it would create side spin, which he didn't like. And then he talked about loft and rise angle. And Harold very much liked people to hit up on the ball. So he wanted to encourage a positive rise angle with, a correct amount of loft to help create a forward roll condition. And that was the third principle. And then the fourth principle was around acceleration, having a slightly positive acceleration in order to control speed. So they all really revolved around the club. And I remember when I went through my PJ training and I started, sort of listening to the ball flight laws and stuff like that, I thought, well, yeah, Harold was telling me stuff like that, when I was a kid. So, I mean, for me, those principles still apply, because they revolve around what good impact conditions look like. And I think, we might all have preferences as a coach, but it's hard to argue with impact. Impact is governed by physics. So there's going to be, you know, most coaches would agree they want certain things to optimize ball flight or a ball roll or whatever it is. Can't get away from that. Their physics. Sometimes we might debate how we get there, but I think Harold had that nailed a long, long time ago. And for me, like he was a great thinker in that respect. He had the ability to think outside of the box, and that showed up in his product design. It showed up in a lot of things that he did. I mean, he was an engineer originally by trade, so he had an expertise in creating things, and he would design putters and various training aids and stuff like that. And he was always kind of a little bit ahead of the game in that respect. And for many years, I don't think he got the credit that he deserved. And then really, it was only really, I would say, like later on in his life that with the work that he did with Padre Harrington, and then the success he had with Yes Golf and the design of the C Groove, that people then really started to sort of give him a bit of credit. And I think, at that time with the C Groove, why that proved to be a success was the technology that we then had available to demonstrate the benefits of that product. So now all of a sudden you've got high speed cameras which can show the ball jumping, skidding, spinning, and stuff that he'd been talking about for years. Now he could actually see in high speed, and then the difference that a technical change could make to that, or a difference that the putter design could make. So so I mean, good principles, I would say, still stand the test of time. I think maybe because he came from an engineering background, he wasn't a golf pro, he wasn't a golf coach, but he was a very good golfer, an avid, plus handicapper who'd actually qualified for a few European Tour events as an amateur. He understood the game. He had an engineering background, so I guess maybe that's why he might have been a little bit more prescriptive with his coaching. But I think the philosophy and the principles behind it was sound and still stand the test of time.
Thanks for sharing that, Phil. He sounds like he was a wonderful mentor for you, and a great mind. So that's pretty cool.
H was a legend, real character, and I think for me, when having a mentor is, I think, invaluable. And some of the coaches I know who have sort of had success, they've all had them in some capacity, and it definitely helps shape your career, and having someone to give you support and stuff like that is massive.
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. And I'm very fortunate to have you as a mentor. So thank you for that.
Of course.
How's Blake? Is he all right?
He's good. You might hear him shouting in the background. I'm trying to get in this room at some point.
Yeah, get him on. Get him on.
Yeah.
Get him in. He'll tell us a few stories about putting, I'm sure. Okay, Phil. Can we go on to a different topic? Let's go to obviously over the years you've taught a lot of tour players, but also like all levels of golfers. What is like the main difference from coaching a tour player to like an amateur golfer?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about amateur golf, if you're looking like at the average amateur golfer, like a middle-aged, mid-handicap golfer,
Yeah.
the biggest difference is ability. In terms of, I would say the biggest difference is, like a tour player generally will have, great hand-eye coordination, and therefore ability. So when you get them to do something, they're able to do it very, very quickly. So they're like proprioception and awareness will be a lot better. And it can be sometimes a little bit more difficult for the less skilled golfer. And then the other thing is with tour players and stuff, you're refining technique for the most part. They have very established patterns that you're just trying to refine and make function better. Whereas I think like the average golfer very often will have, a lot of moving parts, some really poor concepts which don't help, coordination, don't help them, sequence things or coordinate things effectively. So sometimes you're dealing with a lot bigger picture stuff, and like I say, sometimes constrained with their ability to make a movement consistent. So the different challenges for sure. Yeah, and different skill sets as well from a coaching perspective. They're not you have to sort of approach things differently, and even it down to how you communicate, how you might explain things, the information that you present to them. Yeah, they're very, very different lessons, I would say, at times.
You just mentioned like how you communicate. Can you sort of expand on that? What do you mean by that? And like how would you communicate different from a tour player to an amateur?
Well, I mean, sometimes it's not even the differential between amateur and professional. It could be the differential between different people. Even within amateurs, you get guys who maybe are more technically orientated, and some players who are less so. You get maybe players who maybe might a little bit more like, you might learn visually more than auditory and stuff like that. So I think within any lesson, you're always looking at how you're best going to communicate your message, how you best get what you want to, how you put across what you want in the best way. That's the art of coaching for me. Everyone's slightly different, and I think sometimes as a whole, if I'm going to generalize, maybe with more tour players, you can be more specific, and dive a little bit deeper. But ultimately, it's dealing with their livelihood, and a lot of times, they're practicing multiple hours a day, and are already at that level of detail, and the amateur golfer might not be. But I'd even go as far as say it's an individual thing that the tour players I work with that I'll coach differently dependent upon who they are as a people and what they need, where they're at, and stuff like that. And the same be it for amateur golfers.
Hmm. Lovely. No, that's interesting, Phil. And one thing that's always sort of um I don't know, surprised or amazed me with you is your players seem to stick around for a long time. I think you've been with Matt Fitzpatrick for over 10 years or 14 years, is that right? And Stenson for a while. Like, why do you think you keep hold of players for such a long time? Well, how are you so good at that relationship?
I've got an extensive joke catalogue, which I'll dip into, keep making them laugh. Um, there you go. That's the first one. Listen, mate, I don't really know. You'd like to think it's because you might be half decent at your job, but I think it's a lot of different things, isn't it? I mean, I think ultimately, like, you've got to have some success with a player, and that helps, doesn't it? So they trust you, and sometimes that success could come because of luck, or it could come because you're working on the right thing. So, as a coach, you've either got to have a lot. Well, you've got to have a bit of luck as a coach, but you've also got to be able to help that player, haven't you? You've got to, technically be correct, find find what it is that they need to help improve. And I think, from big, and you and I spoke about this before, but I think a really big part of coaching is communication, like interpersonal skills. I know loads of great coaches who have a lot of technical, intricate technical knowledge, but don't necessarily have the success that other coaches have. And if you look at a lot of coaches who have success, then they have, really good interpersonal skills, communicate well, can mold themselves to the player, stuff like that. So, and sometimes that's just the personality of that person. They're adaptable in that way, or other times, I know the coaches have consciously worked at that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different reasons why any coach would be successful or have long periods, and that's, I think you've got to deliver good information over time. I think you've got to be self-critical so that you're always reviewing your own work and trying to improve it. I think you've got to create rapport with that player. You've got to get on well with them. You've got to communicate. And I think also one of the things I think is you have to show that, and you have to be as a coach, I think, that you're as passionate or more than the player that you're working with. I know if as a player, like I had some like really great coaches around me who you just knew were really passionate about helping you, and that creates rapport, I think, and inspires the player. So, and sometimes that'll come naturally. I don't think you can, well, it has to come naturally. I don't think you can fake it. But I think I think it's all those ingredients, and if you can put them into a pot, then I think at any level, whether it's teaching kids, teaching club members, or teaching professionals, the people at the end of the day, and they will gravitate to all of those aspects: good information, good relationships, passion. All those things will keep your students coming back for more. So I think you can apply it to any level, not just working with tall players. Sometimes I think in that environment, it might be a little bit heightened, that the consequences of not coaching well or not playing well. There's a little bit more pressure there, and it might be a bit easier to get the flick at times. But I think you can apply it to every level of golf, every level of every level of student.
Love that, Phil. Yeah, I think one thing you said there was communication, and that's something I see in the great coaches I've seen, yourself, like Mark Bull, great communicator, and even someone like Butch Harmon. Would you say, like, what a great communicator?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know Butch. I've never been around him. I've never seen him coach, but I've never seen a great coach that has success doesn't that isn't a great communicator or doesn't
Sure.
have great interpersonal skills. But everyone speaks of Butch in that way. He's great around his players and stuff. So it's a massive part. I mean, particularly in golf, I think, like, the amount of time that you'll spend around players, you've got to have good relationships with them. So having a good relationship with anyone comes down to interpersonal skills, doesn't it? Even
Absolutely.
your family members. It's a massive part of life in general. The ability to get on with people, whether it comes naturally, whether you work at it, you've got to be able to sort of get on with people, to be able to work with people.
Absolutely. How have you developed those skills over the years, Phil? Like, obviously reflecting, you said earlier, is something you do a lot of, but um yeah, how have you developed that from a kid?
Um, I don't know really. I mean, I can't say it's anything like I've consciously developed. I think it's stuff that you just like intuitively pick up as you go along. You just kind of become aware of things, or you see other coaches work and how they are. I would say, like, I've learned a lot from all the coaches that I speak to, all the coaches that I am lucky to observe. You just pick up things, whether it be consciously or implicitly at times, how they deliver stuff. I mean, like, very early on in my career, I'm trying to think, like, certain instances, but just even, and a lot of students I've worked with have had full swing coaches or physical trainers or other sort of well-established coaches that are in that team, and been fortunate at times to sit in and watch how they coach and how they work. So you pick up stuff like that, don't you? And how they command the environment, how they could speak to the player, you know, how they display their interpersonal skills and communication skills. You're learning stuff like that. Just like an example being like Pete Cowan. I've seen Pete in certain situations where you just think that's empowering, like how he's dealt with that. So there's stuff like that and then I think there's also certain aspects where just sometimes knowing when to make things light-hearted, just knowing when you need to show passion, or knowing when you need to take hold of a situation, or knowing when you've got to push things, or and a lot of that is experience, but learning from the mistakes that you've made and thinking, do you know what, I screwed up there. I should have been more forceful in what I was trying to do, or I should have backed off at that point. So I think like self-reflection, looking at, not being afraid to make mistakes, but learning from them, and then putting plans in place to try and like say, right, if I'm in that situation again, this is how I'm going to behave. So I think, you need experience, getting in there, getting stuck in, don't make mistakes, don't be afraid of making mistakes, and then like continually reflecting and learning, but appreciating that, it's not just about the technical aspect of it. It's about these other aspects and reflecting upon those, not just reflecting upon, right, did I tell him the right thing technically? But, tell him, did I communicate in the best way? Did I create enough rapport with him? Does he get me? Stuff like that. And, I had some setbacks, I would say, early on in my career with players that sort of, came from stuff like that. You just got to, like I say, learn, put it in place, and keep coaching, keep pressing forward. But experience is a big thing as well, I think. The more lessons that you can coach, the more experiences that you have. And I think that's massively important. And I think now a little bit sort of in this day and age, is so much information available, and you can go online and do this course and that course and listen to this expert and that expert, which is all great because, you want to keep pushing and learning. But I also see like a lot of coaches that, are absorbing all this information, but then don't do enough teaching. So how do you start to, first of all, learn to assimilate all that information and put it into like something that's coachable? But then, how do you communicate it? How do you, coach it? How do you do that if you're not got that volume of coaching? And I'll often have like guys that come to me say, I want to be a better putting coach, and they've got access to all this information. They've been learned from so many like good instructors, but then don't teach it. Well, you're never going to become a great putting coach. You can probably hold a very good conversation about putting principles or, whatever, but you'll never be a great coach because you're not getting enough experience. So I think that's a large part of it.
Yeah, totally agree. Phil, would you be able to share with us your biggest mistake and who that was with, and what you learned from that that situation? Can you remember?
Oof. It's tough, really. I think it's hard to pick. It's hard to pick the ones. I think there's just lots of little things, isn't there, where it's like, and sometimes you can make mistakes and get away with it. Like you change something that's then wasn't the right thing, but then it's not being picked up on. All the players manage to still make things work. Little things like that. I think there's been a few situations in my career where I wish I'd like gone back in time, said something different at the right time, not said anything. I think there's lots of different things. It's tough to pick on one specific things, but there'd be, most weeks I could, I'd like to go back and do something different. But like I say, it's just that's part of life, isn't it? And part of coaching. But as long as you are aware of that and reflect and think, well, what would have been a better solution, then that's where hopefully you can make better decisions moving forward. It's tough to pick one sort of specific time. I guess there's one that does strike out when I think about it. I worked with Martin Keimer in 2011, maybe it was, in around that period of time. And I gave him some information that helped how he aimed the putter related to his head position, which I think was correct at that time. But I think the timing of that was completely wrong during events. And as a consequence, and a little bit to do with language barrier and understanding, it just didn't work. And very quickly, Martin was like, I can't, this isn't right for me. And we didn't really continue our work. Now, subsequently, I've ended up back doing some work with Martin and, being able to help him, and I have a good relationship with him. But there's a long time passed in between, and you just wonder, well, if I'd have done things differently, like what could have happened? Could I have worked with him for a longer period of time, still with him? Could I have helped him? You could have been part of his sort of amazing journey and career. But as much as I thought technically I was right in what I spotted, I think the delivery of that information, the timing of it was wrong, and also maybe how I delivered it was wrong. So that would be one example. But it was a good learning experience for me. I was sort of fairly early on in my career in terms of working with players at that level. So yeah, you just take it on the chin and try and improve from it.
Love it. No, that's great. So, Phil, talk us through like tour life, like talk us through what a normal week would look like. Obviously, at the moment, things are a bit different, but like talk us like behind the scenes, if you will, what it would look like from like, yeah, when you arrive and when you leave, and behind the scenes in meetings or anything like that, team meetings. Can you share that?
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, I probably do somewhere in the region between 20 to 25 events a year. And then, some of those events could be just practice days. And then some events could be, like the whole week. It depends on the event, where, and access, and one thing or another. I mean, while I'm there at events, are generally sort of fairly long days. So you could be, down at the course by 7 o'clock and leaving it by 7. Practice days will be spent generally with like spending an hour or so with each player on the putting green. I would say on average, daily practice accounts for about an hour. Each player would generally spend about an hour on the putting green. So you're with them on the putting green, and then you might spend time with them also out on the course as well. Hopefully, if you might get a couple of players who will then maybe play together, so it helps you with time management. At events, a lot of time it's sort of supervised practice. You're not necessarily like giving the player a new lesson each week. It's not like that. You're coaching, and part of that will be supervised practice, helping them, keeping on top of the things that they need to. You're helping them prepare specifically for that week. And the players that I work with, I'll see outside of events. So ideally, that's where you try and do most of the technical stuff. And then when you go to events, you're just making sure that they're keeping on top of those things. So they can be quite long weeks. I feel it now when I get home from like a trip away. It kind of takes its toll, particularly like majors or big events, because you can be you're up at like 4:30 and get getting in at 8 o'clock at night type of thing, long days. You've obviously got like the additional sort of stress of that week. So I feel it when I get home, I'm knackered. So that's the kind of impact of the working week. I mean, there's the stuff outside of that as well. I think what sometimes people don't appreciate with golf or coaching at this level is it's elite sport, isn't it? There's a lot of stuff that goes on outside of the arena in terms of helping players get ready from like stats, team meetings, conversations. And golf teams can be quite big, and they're all individuals who are part of a team. So very often, you can be having phone calls with the golf coach because he wants to discuss some certain things about the players put in, and then you're talking to the stats guy, talking to the caddy. There's can be quite a lot of phone calls that'll go on and off weeks, and various meetings that'll go on in terms of analysis and designing practice schedules, looking at player stats, etc. There's a lot of noise as well at times outside of the events, which you kind of got to deal with. So if you're working with, if you've got like a number of tour players that you're working with, there could be quite a large amount of time spent on those off weeks, sort of just dealing with that stuff, which can be quite time consuming. And then you've on off weeks, you have like players send you videos or send across some performance stuff, and you're keeping an eye on that. So it can be your weeks off are not weeks off. I mean, for me, I've got other aspects of my business which I have to attend to when I'm home, but then you're not away from tour in any way. You've still got quite a lot of work associated with making sure things are, going in the right direction when you get back out there to an event.
Love that. I imagine it's quite an emotional roller coaster out there, Phil, when you've got, so many players, some will be putting well, some will be putting bad. Talk us through like how you manage your emotions and how they can, how do you feel like, obviously a player's going out to play, he puts rubbish, like how do you feel after that, and how do you manage it?
Yeah, I think I've gotten a bit better at that over the years. I mean, it's obviously it's you've got a vested interest when a player goes out and performs. I don't particularly like watching on the golf course because it's you're so involved, aren't you? And you've got no control over it. But obviously it's worthwhile because you're seeing and picking up certain things. But it feels like every missed putt is like a little dagger in the heart. But as you get older, you sort of cope with it a bit better because I think maturity, experience, you have a perspective on life, don't you? I've got a family at home. What's more important, players miss put or family? So, but there's obviously a significance to it because it's your job, and players miss puts, you don't have a job. So there's a pressure, but you just have to have perspective and try and get rid of any emotion. And I think I've been pretty good about that anyway, in terms of not being emotive when it comes to work, being sort of pragmatic. I've always enjoyed sort of like analysis and data. So you just get drawn into that and you look at things more objectively. And I think you have to as a coach, because players will always get drawn into the subjective emotion, or caddies, or because they're so involved on the course. You have to always work on being a little bit more objective. So if you can do that naturally, I think that's great. If you are particularly really, drawn in emotionally, I think you have to really temper that, because golf's so difficult and you've got no control over it. You won't sleep at night. So just trying to remain objective, draw on the data, stuff like that. That's how I just try and deal with it. But naturally, yeah, it can be stressful at times. There's been particular periods, in terms of some players I've worked with, and the level of noise that you get around that player, and some of the some of the BS that you get about that player or directed at you, it's hard for it to not sort of affect you in some way. But I don't think it's ever affected my day job in terms of how I would go about it. But sometimes it's just a bit harder to switch off, and there's like an underlying level of stress which you can just feel is there, when at other times it isn't. But I think that's part and parcel of working at that level, and working with a level of certain players. I mean, like when I worked with Rory, like some of the noise that came with it, was frightening, and some of the, quite frankly, absolute bullshit that was spoken about, that was unbelievable. And like social media, you get direct messages of people saying, "Oh, you should be doing this, should be doing that, or you're screwing them up, or whatever." I mean, you get the other stuff as well, so you get both ends of the spectrum. But yeah, no, it's interesting in that respect. And I think I had it when I was working with Westwood when he was number one in the world, and I think because he's had maybe some historic issues with his putting, then sometimes you think that you were the devil working with a player. And some of the comments that you'd hear, and sort of criticism that could directed. So you've got that aspect of it, the noise around it, but then you've also got the stuff that you're dealing with yourself in terms of watching them out on the course, or working with them on a day-to-day stuff.
God, that must be hard. Yeah, like people messaging saying horrible things and stuff. Yeah, it's
Yeah. He's great as well, because I'd even get some coaches messaging me saying he's doing this, what you should be doing this.
What did you reply?
Well, I tried to be as diplomatic as possible at times, but every now and then you just want to tell someone to F off, don't you? So invariably I did. And there's certain things that I wouldn't do to other coaches or other people. And when it started to get into the realms of that, then I just quite frankly let them know how I felt about it. Which sometimes you just got to do so they don't message you back. But yeah, it's interesting. Everyone becomes an expert, don't they? And I mean, one thing that I've learned about is, working with players, elite players, is it's easy. And I would be guilty of this early on in my career, where you look in from the outside and you think, right, I can see what's going on there. I'd love to have a crack at that, or I'll fix that. You don't really know what's going on until you get under the bonnet. Until you get under the bonnet, only then do you have an appreciation of what's actually happening, and then how you can improve it. And I know that about the players I've had success with. I know that about the players that I haven't had success with. You've got to be in that group, in that team, appreciate the dynamics of everything, not just the technique, not just where that player is in terms of where they are technically, but the dynamics of where that player is in their career, their life, their other relationships, injuries, this, that, and the others. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. So until you get under the bonnet, you've got no idea, absolutely no idea. You can make assumptions from outside, but you don't know. And then the other thing is, you don't know if you've got the capabilities of them fixing it until you're under the bonnet, and then you're having to do that there yourself. So it's easy to be very critical of coaching from the outside. And, from my own experiences over the years, then it's made me realize to take a step back and not judge others, and even try and support others in those situations, because it's easy to make assumptions. And I think in the media as well, like with commentators or people that are paid to have an opinion, then it's great, isn't it? Because they don't have that insight. They're paid to create an opinion, so they do. But a lot of the time, it's laughable at times, and I'll see it when the players that I might not be sort of coaching directly, but I have an insight into certain things, and then you hear some stuff that's spouted in the media or stuff like that, and you think that's so far from the truth, or they have no idea, but that then creates a perception in the public or a perception elsewhere. So there's a lot of stuff like that that goes on, which you don't have to deal with if you're not in that environment. If you're teaching club members, you'll get it in a different sort of level where you can see where the members will be making assumptions about what you might have done with a player without any understanding of your intention, the player's abilities, or X, Y, Z. So you can apply it to every level we coach at. At times, it just can be quite intensive at tour level and also quite intrusive at times. So, but you wouldn't change it. It's part and parcel of the job, and goes with the territory, I guess.
Yeah, like it. It's I like that concept under the bonnet because people, you don't see what's under the bonnet till you get there. So that's good. The talking of going back to like trolls, you've been known over the years to have like a bit of a spat or a bit of a word or two with people on Twitter. What really gets on your goat with those people on Twitter?
I don't know, really. I mean, I'm less prone to doing that, but I think at times listen. I think you get what you see with me. I'd like to think. So if someone goads me or blows my skirt up, I'm quite happy to put them back in their place. At times, things escalate and you think, well, I wish I hadn't have done that, and I think I'm better at ignoring people now. But don't I try? I like to think I don't suffer fools, so occasionally I'll if goaded, I'm quite happy to put someone back in their place.
Absolutely. I think that having to get to know you the last few years, Phil, you definitely say it as it is. So that's a good asset to have, for sure.
Okay.
Okay, Phil. Ryder Cup is sort of my favorite tournament. I'm sure it's many people's favorite tournament. You've been fortunate to attend as a coach for, if I'm right in saying. Can you sort of talk us through that experience that week, what your sort of key learnings are from each individual one? Because I know that each one's been slightly different. 2016, I think you got quite a lot of stick for being sort of the secret weapon, and then I think everyone putted pretty poorly. But I don't know if you can expand on any of those. And then 2018 was fab. So yeah.
No, I mean, I would Ryder Cup's probably my favourite event as well. So, being lucky enough to attend 4 of them so far has been great. First one, 2010, was a bit of a whirlwind.
God's country.
Yeah, God's country, yeah. Although he didn't provide the weather that week.
That was good. That was good weather.
Yeah. But was it? Okay. I'll let you off then. Yeah, no, I mean that was that I didn't know where to stand or what to do that week, but it was just good because you had it's the best seat in the house, isn't it? You kind of on the course watching guys play. I mean, the main thing really is you're there as an observer. You're not really coaching because the players don't have the time, the capacity to practice really. They're just preparing for the event. Practice rounds are long. You don't have a lot of time to themselves. And generally it's at the end of a long season. So you've got to have your game at, by the time it's been well documented, you've got to have your game by the time you get to the Ryder Cup. So you're there really just to support and I guess emergency stuff, or for players, getting rested on a day. You can obviously do a little bit of work there. But I would say for the most part, you're there observing and supporting more than anything else. So it's brilliant from that respect. It's great. Wales, I was there, for most of the week. I went to one at Glen Eagles, which was really good. I thought Paul McGinley was a great captain. Although sort of those two, you felt very excluded actually as a coach. You didn't have access to any areas other than the sort of practice facilities, and then at times the golf course. And really, it was only until sort of 2016 with Darren Clark that he actually really made the coaches inclusive. And that would be the first Ryder Cup you actually really felt part of the team. You travelled with the team on the plane. You stayed in, a hotel that had its own like team room for coaches. You were allowed in the team room with players at certain times. You had access to the locker room, which was really good because you could, get time with the player if you needed to debrief or just say, needed a minute because it's tough otherwise. So, 2016 was obviously we got beat. I got a bit of stick over various things because I had a few players. I think I had about 8 players I worked with that actually made the team that year. So it was obviously fantastic for me, and I was really excited about going. And we obviously got beat, and there was a few comments, and I got a bit of stick. And even if it's the but the jokes amongst your friends and guys out on tour, you're getting hammered for it. I think there was an article by Tim Rosafort just before saying like Europe's secret weapon, and then referring to me because I worked with quite a few members of the team. So I got called a weapon after, which was in a negative way, not a positive weapon. After, which was obviously it's easy to take a few things to heart, but that was a brilliant experience for me. It's like I thought like Darren was a great captain in how like inclusive he was of everyone, and there was a moment like because you were allowed in the team room. There was a moment on I think after the first day because they got like pumped in the morning, and I think in the afternoon they rallied a comeback, and then there was a team meeting in the locker room just at the end of that first day, and I'm sat there like in the corner, and you've got like Sergio, Poulter, you've got all these like Westwood, like Clarkey, Bjorn's in there, and then you got like Rory, and you got like all these iconic players, and they're having a team meeting, and the passion that was coming out, because they'd rallied back and he felt like they were back in the tournament, and the dialogue, like I literally had like hairs on my arms, I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is like being in the changing room in an FA Cup semi-final, when there's like a rally call for the second half. So I just thought like I was there, I was like, what a sporting moment to be like, to be part of and see it, because like I remember my dad taking me to the, God, it'd be 85 Ryder Cup at the Belfry or whatever as a kid, and you've seen this sort of great sporting event growing up, watched it on TV. You've seen these like iconic golfers that you've looked up to, and all of a sudden you're in the same room as them, like getting an insight into first of all, the passion that they have about the event, and like as a collective, how much of a team that they were. So that was amazing, really. Unfortunately, they got beat. But then the other insight to that was on the Sunday when they got beat, it was amazing, right? Because there was obviously this very like boisterous atmosphere in terms of the US, and like it was poisonous at times. Like even like coaching staff walking around or families were getting abused by spectators. I got abused by spectators, and then like they won, and then the whole place was quiet. It was like people left. It was literally like they'd only turned up to Barrack Europe, and then they won, and it was like, well, what do we do now? Like, that's it. They went home. And then so you kind of walking off the course, and there's no atmosphere. And you go into the clubhouse, and the only atmosphere was in the European team room, where basically there was a party. So you go up to there, and as much as everyone is disappointed, gutted to win, it was like, we've done our best. It was such a good team spirit, right? Let's have a bloody good celebration of a great week. So
Love that.
that was interesting, and everyone got, everyone had a really good drink. You're sharing stories from the week and stuff like that. And you'd have thought that they'd have won, but you could just tell they hadn't, because there was that little tinge of, but they celebrated it. And then I think if you fast forward to 2018, the fans in France were amazing. I mean, when they won, the place was going off. I mean, it had gone off all week, but it was going off at the end. For hours, the fans were there celebrating, and that would be really noticeable thing just from a sporting experience, was how both sets of fans kind of reacted to the team winning. I don't know if I've never really been to many American sports, but I don't know if there's a different kind of fan base, or fans sort of approach supporting their team in a different way. I don't really know, but it was something certainly noticeable between 2016 2018. And 18 was obviously great just to sort of be part of. Again, there as a spectator, I had Fran, Tommy, Henrik, and Justin. And I mean, Fran and Tommy played great, putted great. So that was just brilliant to see. If the players are putting poorly at the Ryder Cup, it makes it a kind of a tough week to watch. But Henrik as well, although he didn't play all the matches, in his second match, I think, on that Friday afternoon, he held a couple of absolutely critical putts coming down the stretch, which, if you go back and look at those matches, were massive putts. There was a putt on 17, which was, if he misses, the match could have gone the other way, and there's a massive shift there. So there's certain key putts in any tournament, and no more so than the Ryder Cup, which are massive. And Henrik kind of came through a couple of clutch moments, which were brilliant for me to see, and for him. I think he was a little bit disappointed about only having sort of a specific role in the foursomes, but he was really focused and determined to make sure he gave 3 points and didn't moan, and so it was great for him to sort of come through those clutch moments and deliver. So I mean, Ryder Cup, if I never went to a golf tournament again, then the Ryder Cup would definitely be one of those that I would miss. It's just a great sporting event, isn't it? So it's been, I could talk about that all morning, Ollie, if I'm honest. But, I won't.
Tell me, how good was the after party?
It was awesome, actually. It was good. Really good.
Did you have a drink out of the cup?
Yeah, I think everyone did in that room.
Get in there.
Yeah, I think it was brilliant. I mean, that, I know it's talked about in terms of the team spirit and stuff like that, but it's so evident. It's so evident when you're there that generally the guys all get on really well, and I remember being stood by the dance floor, having a drink on my own, just stood watching, and you literally had Rosie McIlroy and a bunch of others giving it big guns on this dance floor with the Ryder Cup, and it was like there were 18-year-olds on and they'd been out for the first time. They were just really going for it, and it shows that that they have good relationships. That even though they're trying to beat each other every week, there is a team spirit there. I guess moments like that, because they've had that success over the years, it perpetuates that, doesn't it? It kind of enhances that for more and more. But the party was really good. It's nice to kind of share moments like that with people. All families were there, coaching staff and whatnot were there. The only downside was trying to get up the following day and make a flight, which is probably the worst journey I've ever had, ever. I felt so rough.
Did you show them your moves on the dance floor, Phil?
Um, I think I did, but luckily, people would have been too drunk to have remembered them.
Ah, that's all right then.
Yeah.
Moving forward to the next Ryder Cup, Phil. Obviously, there's an opportunity or a chance that you're gonna coach players on both sides. Have you had a think about that? I'm sure you have. Like, what's that going to look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been in that position previously. I think you've just got to, I know Pete Cowan has had players on both sides previously, but listen, you're there as a coach, aren't you? I mean, so you're just there to prepare the players that you work with to the best of their abilities, and they'll decide who wins when they get out on the golf course. So you just got to go about it professionally. So if I am lucky enough to have a player on the other side, and if I am lucky enough to attend, I'll do my best for both players. My ultimate responsibility is to prepare the players I work with. They're the ones that pay me, aren't they? So, I mean, as a supporter, I'll be wanting Europe to win. It'll make it harder, obviously, when you've got, as a supporter, when you've got a player that you coach with playing against a European player. But it's nothing you can. I mean, I've had like players go against each other head to head to win tournaments, and at the end of the day, it's not down to you; it's down to them. There's nothing you can do. You just there as a professional, and you look at it professionally. It's like I've been watching that documentary on Amazon Prime sort of this week with Mourinho at Tottenham.
Okay.
Like he's professional, isn't he? Like when Tottenham played Chelsea, he wanted Tottenham to absolutely murder Chelsea, doesn't he? Even though he's probably got massive loyalty to Chelsea, and probably a result he would have looked out for prior to being involved with any other club. But when you're working at that club, you've got a professional loyalty, and you do your job. So, and it's the same here, But I guess as a supporter, I'll always want Europe to win. But if I go to a Ryder Cup and I'm asked to, I'll certainly be prepared to do my job for a player who would be on the US team.
Like it, professional approach. I just got a question on you've worked with some right characters over the years, Phil. So like Monty and like Thomas Bjorn sort of spring to mind. Have you got any good stories about Monty or Bjorn you can share with us?
I've got a few about Thomas that I probably couldn't share with you. um, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think like talking before about experience. Now I've been lucky to work with some really like strong characters and a lot of different players spanning different generations as well, and that's been a massive learning curve for me. I was a fairly youngish coach, working with players like Westwood or Thomas Bjorn, Darren Clark, who are players that I, as a kid, watched on telly, and all of a sudden, sort of coaching them, and they're massive characters as well that can be fairly difficult to sort of deal with at times. So that helped shape me, I would say, early on in terms of like being able to survive in that environment and learn from how best to deal with certain scenarios. Like Thomas like is a good friend of mine. I like Thomas a lot. We did in lockdown a putting social together, And he's a real character, but by his own admission, he's volatile and can be difficult to deal with. So, like, I think I've been sacked more times by Thomas than I have by all the other players put together. But we'd always end up back working together, and I'd always find it difficult to say no because ultimately he's a charmer, and you've always got that sort of that wanting to prove someone wrong and and go back and do a better job. So yeah, I've had a few instances with Thomas where we've had bust ups on the putting green, shouting matches at times, and then probably can't go into some of the exchanges, but he's a good bloke. I have a lot of time for him, and he's someone that sort of battled the yips through his career, so it was kind of challenging in different ways to help him overcome that. But great experiences, and he's very insightful in terms of golf. Like, I'll often pick his brains, and I love listening to him talk about golf, from the politics, the commercial side of stuff, down to how to play your best stuff on the golf course. He's always got really good insights. I mean, you mentioned Monty there. Like, Monty, I was fortunate to work with him on one occasion, and he came down to the studio, and I'd never really met him before and didn't know much about him. And you just have this sort of perceived persona through the media, but he was really engaging. And he phoned me up actually just as he was on his way down and requested if I could meet him for a bacon butty in the clubhouse first. So our putting lesson started by having a bacon butty and a cup of tea, and then he taught me through his kind of putting history and what he was looking to try and get out of that session. But yeah, really engaging, thoughtful fella. You learn from all your players. I mean, you know that, Ollie, don't you? You learn from every player that you come across.
Absolutely.
And it's like there's a different generation of players a little bit now, and you can see sort of, I don't know, but I think like players that come through now a little bit, I think they'll work with coaches maybe more from an earlier age, and somehow there seems sort of a little bit of a different dynamic, or whether it's because I'm getting older and players getting younger, I don't know. But it's been good to have had the opportunity to work with players like that. If only from the fact that when I was a kid, they were the players I watched on TV. They were the players that I'm watching Westwood compete for majors and watching Bjorn win at Loch Lomond and stuff like that. When I was a kid, I'm watching Seve and I'm listening to Seve talk about how good Thomas Bjorn is. And then, years down the line, you've got an opportunity to work with him. So just from as a golf fan, they've all been great experiences.
I love that. I like the Monty story. I could just imagine him like tucking into a bacon bap talking about his putting. It's quite
Quite... He was good. He was good value.
And I'm sure Thomas Bjorn as well. He I think in the last lockdown he cracked me up. Didn't he like try and hit a shot out of his conservatory and shanked it and smashed it the window or something? If I recall.
He did. I mean, he's a great chipper of the ball, isn't he? And he went to do a little video for social, and first shot shanked it through a window.
Yeah, he should leave the tips to Padre Carrington.
Yeah.
Phil, so what's sort of next? What's going on? Obviously, the launch of your academy has been a sort of great success over the last couple of months. Talk us through sort of that academy. What's the reason for that, and how it's going, and what it's all about?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess really lockdown has given us the opportunity to do that this year. I'd always had the idea that I wanted to do something online at some point. Like a good friend of mine, good friend of ours, like David Orr, and David's like a great coach who I respect, and he's been a good friend over the years. And David was having I'd seen him kind of launch his online academy and followed him, and in terms of like seeing what he was doing, and thought, that's something that we should do at some point. I've just never had the time to do it. So I think like this year just gave me the opportunity to basically put like a bit of a program together. But I wanted to do it a little bit more directed towards the amateur golfer though, because I think a lot of information at times, like so these types of websites can be like directed more towards the coaches. And I think like with putting, there are a lot of misconceptions and misbeliefs, and when it comes to putting up, or particularly directed towards amateurs, like what information they can glean to try and make themselves better. So the idea was to try and build a website where your average golfer can go on and learn more about stuff that could be specific to them. Rather than going on and learning a method that's, could be just specific to one person, try and piece together an idea of what they do and then how they might go about sort of improving that. So that was the premise of it. So when over lockdown, we had the time to be able to create those videos, and I had a couple of guys who could help me in terms of the website, putting it together. They had some expertise in how to put something like this together. So we did it and then launched that in September, which has been quite good. So philkenyonputting.com. So it's a subscription-based program where, like I say, any golfer can go on. And I actually found that quite a few coaches have joined, and they're getting some value out of it. But you can go on, it's based around 7 modules, 7 elements of putting, which I believe are sort of the principal areas that you need to manage to put well. And then alongside the sort of those 7 modules, we've got a 12-week program where any golfer could start and work through something systematically within 12 weeks. So we do like an initial kind of analysis for them that they can complete online, and then we'll direct them to the videos specific to their needs, and then structure that within a 12-week program. And then they can repeat that cycle at any time during the 12-month membership. And then one of the other things that we've been able to do is put on some weekly webinars for them as well. So to try and make it as interactive as possible, give them an opportunity to answer questions. If there's anything that they're unsure about, working through the videos and that, they've got an opportunity to sort of speak to us about that. So, I mean, it's been enjoyable. Glad we've had the time to do it this year. Otherwise, I'm not sure, any other year we would have been able to do it. So hopefully it's something, we can develop over time as we get back to some sort of normality. So I guess, lockdown has not been great for many different reasons. And, one positive for me is we've been able to sort of do this, which we wouldn't have had a chance of otherwise. So, so there we go.
I think like obviously I'm very fortunate to be sort of part of that with you, and like the online academy is just the best bit of information for golfers from putting that I've ever seen. Like I know you're very critical on yourself, and you'll say, "Oh, I want to get that better or this," but it is like unbelievable, and that goes like from a coaching point of view. That is the best sort of tool I've ever had my hands on, and yeah, from an amateur point of view to improve their putting, it's the best £350 someone could ever spend, I think. So I know you've had a lot of blood, sweat and tears putting it together, but it's definitely worthwhile, and it's only going to go strength to strength. So well done.
Well, I appreciate that, Ollie. I mean, you've kind of like seen it firsthand, really, in terms of like what we've tried to do, and we're working on something at the moment to integrate, some of the coaches that we have a close working relationship with, like yourself, to offer some more personalised one-to-one instruction within that program. So, as we've been working to try and, work towards integrate that, you've seen it firsthand. So I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's that self-critical stuff. You just look at how you can do things better. But it's nice to get feedback that people think it's good what we've done so far.
Definitely, yeah, it's class. It's good for anyone. Phil, but just to finish off, two quick questions.
Yeah.
What is the best gift you ever received from a player?
Oh. Um, I've had one or two gifts off players over the years, but um, it's not. It's not. For me, what I like are memories.
Hmm.
So like the things I've enjoyed the most over the years are collecting like flags from tournaments where the players have won. So, they're not even really gifts, really. Um, and I would say some of the flags that I've got from the wins that I've had with players, they're the best gifts because that's a cherished memory, isn't it? And I've had one or two really nice personalized messages on those flags. Um, and each flag represents a different memory. It's a different point in your career. It has a different meaning at each point. And then you got some flags from really important events or events of significance for you. So I would say best gifts I've ever had are these sort of flags where a player signs them, and I've got them up in the studio. I've got one or two here in my golf room. They're the best things because it's like it helps you cement a memory and stuff like that. So that
I
would
love
be,
that.
yeah, best
I love
things.
that. What's the US Open one from a couple of years ago? I can't think of Woodland. What he wrote was pretty special, wasn't it? Do you remember what it was?
Yeah. It was. He wrote a very long, very thoughtful message. Um, uh, there's no way he wrote it. It must have been Gabby, his wife, that wrote it. Gary's not that articulate. So no. Jokes aside, it was really thoughtful and was nice. So that's got sort of pride of place. Yeah, on we've got a little couple of walls in the studio where a lot of these flags are housed. So yeah, that was a particular nice one. It was, obviously US Open to win to win a major at such an iconic venue like Pebble Beach, to be involved with a player, winning an event of that magnitude. And I think like historically, Gary's never, statistically been a great putter, and that was something when he asked me to work with him, he was, looking to improve. So, given that week to put so well in such an event and then win was, yeah, it's an amazing buzz as a coach to be involved in stuff like that. So that's what I mean, like memories. Like when I look at that flag, it brings back, nice memories. So as I get older and worse as a coach and all my players leave me, at least I can look at my flags and bring back memories of how it used to be.
Remembering the good old days.
Yeah.
um, yeah, that's good. Like that. With like one last thing, I don't know, like you've got a bit of a fetish, haven't you? And you're right to share your fetish with
Well, the wife's not in the room, so go on. Where are you going with this?
how many pairs of trainers have you got, Phil?
I don't count them, to be honest. I'm not as bad as what I used to be, but yeah, no, I do have a little bit of a trainer fetish.
Why?
Um, I've got no idea. I like shoes and I like trainers. Um, And sometimes I might buy a pair of trainers, even though I might know I might not wear them that much, just because I have them, or I'll buy trainers in different colours because I like the trainer that much that I want. So yeah, I'm got a bit of a fetish when it comes to trainers, but
How many?
really,
Have a guess of how many pairs? Like, are we talking like 10 or 100 or 500?
it wouldn't be 500, but it would be a lot. I have to box them now, and like we have to store them because they don't fit in any of the cupboards and the spare room and stuff like that.
It's funny.
Some belted in there though.
What's your favorite? Yeah, I was going to say, like, what's the go-to pair that's like the babies?
I've got a bit of a thing for Adidas trainers, so I always like, and my favourites will be like the old school stuff, which still stands the test of time, like your Gazelles and stuff like that, Stan Smiths and that. But I do, I like Bounce, so I'm always like looking at the latest, because they're really comfortable shoes. So when you're on your feet a lot, so I'll wear them a lot with work. Particularly like indoors rather than wearing golf shoes. So yeah, it's like I say, not something I'm proud of, but I do have a trainer addiction.
Well, it's important to have a hobby, Phil.
Yeah, preferably one that doesn't cost you money.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's a cheap hobby.
Yeah.
But there we are. Phil, I'm really conscious of your time and gracious of your time, and thoroughly enjoyed that conversation today. Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem, Ollie. Thanks for having me. And good luck with the podcast. I know you've had some great guests so far, and I know you've continued to get them. So good luck with it.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate your time.
All right, no problem. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.